Hi, I'm Stefan, the BMW DIY guy, and is your oil thermostat gasket leaking in your BMW? This is an easy fix, and I want to show you how. All right, guys, let's walk through this a little bit and the reasons why you're going to want to do this. And this is not a hard thing to do, but it is actually very, very common. So if you have, for example, an F30, F32, so that's a 3 Series or 4 Series, same generation M3, M4, my M2C, that's the N55 motor, the S55 motor, all of these instructions are going to be exactly the same because the oil thermostat is exactly the same. Now, that's that block where you have the two hoses that come up from your oil cooler. Now, that block has a gasket on the back of it where it mates up against the engine, and that gasket is really common to leak. It's just going to happen. You didn't do anything wrong. It's not like the part is bad, just the gasket will fail over time, and that's what's happened in my car. So I've got an aftermarket Musselman thermostat on my car, but the instructions are going to be exactly the same. I want to walk you through this because there's no reason why you couldn't do this work yourself, and also prevents your motor from getting all dirty and getting oil all over the place. And I really like keeping my engine clean. All right, so let's jump under the hood and I'll show you what I'm talking about. All right, so here we are under the hood, and this is going to look pretty much exactly the same whether you have an N55 or S55 motor. You're looking at oil thermostat right here. Now, if you have the OEM one, it's going to look quite a bit different from this Musselman upgrade, but the process is going to be exactly the same. You have 3 bolts that hold it into place, 1, 2, and then there's 1 down underneath, 3 that you can't see right now, and you're going to have to take this long bolt out, which is going to drop both of the feed hoses or feed pipes that come up and underneath. Once they're out of the way, you can actually get to the 3rd bolt holding this all in place. So one of the very first things we're going to want to do, and I'm going to go a little bit further than I need to in this case because I want to be able to give you a clear view of what's going on. So I'm actually going to pull my strut bar and my front air intake. If you have an N55 motor, the instruction is going to be a little bit different. You don't have a front strut bar like the S55, but it's all pretty straightforward. So if you have an S55, you're going to want to pull off your top plastics. Those are 10 millimeter little quarter turn nuts right at the top on both sides. And then there's little push rivets in each corner. So go ahead and take those plastics off. Then you'll get to the bolts here in front. Now, if you notice, I've got different bolts. These are normally 13 millimeter bolts, 2 short ones in the front and 2 or 3 long ones in the back, depending on your car. So you'll take those out. I have different bolts in this case because I've upgraded my bolt kit through my whole motor. As you can tell, you can see all the blue. But we're going to take that off, and then we're going to take this front intake pipe off as well. I want to make sure that I can get down underneath this because I'm really going to cover it very, very well with paper towels and rags and all kinds of stuff, because as I do this to replace the gasket that fits behind this thermostat, I'm going to let out some oil, not a lot, but I don't want to make a mess, and then I want to be able to clean up. Now, one of the things that clued me in right here is I noticed I had a little bit of oil sitting back here, and my motor is super clean. So immediately I was like, hold on. I took a look at my oil filter cap right here. It is sealed down well, and I don't see any other oil around anywhere else around the back. So at this point, I started looking underneath. Now it's really hard to see because I've got an intake pipe right here, or a coolant pipe, excuse me, but right down in there, you can see I had some oil on it. So you can tell it's leaking out the back a little bit, and it's leaking down a little bit. So I want to clean up, make sure that leak's taken care of, keep my motor clean, make sure I'm not leaking any oil. All right, so all of that said, I'm going to take my strut bar off, take the plastics, take the strut bar off, take my intake pipe out, which is really easy as well. You just loosen your hose clamp on this side, lift the whole thing out. So let's get that done, and then we're going to take the thermostat off. All right, so as you can see, I have my strut brace off. So there's those 13 millimeters. There's the long ones in the back, the 2 short ones in the front, unless you have different bolts like me. You also have a 10 millimeter right here that connects your reservoir to the strut bar. Now again, if you have an N55, so like a 330, 335, that sort of thing, you're not going to have that strut bar all the way across. You will have your front intake duct off your air box though. So this is going to be similar. You just want to loosen the clamp on this side. Usually it's just typical hose clamp, so it's a screwdriver to loosen the hose clamp. In this case, I've got my upgraded clamps, which look great. So it's a 5 millimeter. Now, the one thing as well, you want to make sure to unplug your MAF sensor. So you just depress the little clip and pull the plug out. It'll look similar on an N55. And if you have a vacuum hose, like my car does, and some of the N55s do, you just squeeze on the collar and pull it back. So once that's done, you can just take the air box and just lift, and the whole thing will come out. That'll give us a chance to look here underneath. We're going to pack it full of rags and paper towels to make sure we don't leak anything, but we'll get all set up, so we'll do this as cleanly as possible. So let me get my intake out, and I'll show you what the next steps are. All right, so now that we've got a clear look at your thermostat, you can see you've got 3 bolts. 1, 2 tucked, the second one is tucked behind this pipe right here. It's a little hard to see right for the moment. And then the third is actually all the way back behind here, and you're not going to be able to get to it until these are off. So now that the intake is out as well, you can see, as I put a light right here, you can see a lot more clearly. I definitely have some oil residue in there. So it's probably leaking here on this side from that back part of that gasket. So really no big deal. So a couple of things. If you have the S55, and you can see I tucked this hose back, this hard feed line actually has a reverse torx bolt right here. You're going to want to take that out. If I remember correctly, it's a reverse 8mm, I believe. I'll double check here in a second. That'll give you a little bit of flexibility with this hose, and in this pipe, you can move it around and get to this post right here much more easily. Now again, I have the Mosselman thermostat, which I highly recommend. I've got a great install video for that, but if you still have the OEM, it's not going to be any different. You've got these 3 bolts, and you have this big long bolt that goes down through the center that is usually a 5mm Allen. This drives all the way down through the center and holds this collar in place and holds these hoses in place. Now, with the gaskets that you need, there's a big gasket for the back and 2 O-rings that you're going to replace on here. So at this point, what you're going to want to do is pack all down in here. Pack in rags, pack in paper towels, whatever you've got handy, because as soon as you pull this bolt and push these hoses down, or these pipes down, excuse me, you're going to get some oil that comes out. And the last thing you want to do when you're trying to clean up is make a mess. Okay, so go ahead and pack this area. Make sure that you don't get oil all over. If you have an S55, go ahead and pull this reverse torx bolt right here, get this up and pull it out of the way a little bit. Then we're going to take both of these pipes and move them down. All right, really quickly, just for reference, so again, I've got my Mosselman thermostat, but if you have the original, this is what it looks like, you can tell. And these are actually E12 bolts. So in this case, with my upgrade, they're 10mm. These are actually the titanium bolts, which is cool. But the default bolts are E12, so that's a reverse torx, okay? So as you can tell, I have all kinds of paper towels packed down in here. I've thrown some rags, some sacrificial rags that are about at end of life anyway. Got them packed in real tight. So the next thing I'm going to do is take the 5mm bolt, back this off, and then you can start to just gently press on these 2 pipes, and they'll pop down and out. Now they won't go very far, and oil's going to come up and out of both of these. Then at that point, and if you have this metal pipe loose like I do, which gives you just a little bit more play to get to the bolt back behind it, you should be able to start to get this pulled off. Okay, so be aware this is the point where you're going to start to get oil around. So just be prepared. I'm going to throw some gloves on. Make sure you have everything to soak up here. Once those are out, you can take 1, 2, and the 3rd bolt right back here out, and then pull the thermostat off. All right, guys, as you can tell, it's off. I just backed off all 3 bolts, whether you've got the OEM bolts or the 10mm in this case. Now, one thing to keep in mind, and don't be surprised by it, you're going to get a little bit of burst of coolant from right here. So you've got oil that comes through and coolant as well. So you're going to get a little bit of that comes out, so don't worry, you didn't do anything wrong. You can see the original gasket here. You can see that it's not seated quite right, maybe in a couple of places, or it was starting to break down a little bit. You can also see this pipe underneath now that has quite a bit of residue and gross on it. So it's definitely been leaking for a little bit. So now I'm going to take this opportunity. I'm going to clean the surface of the thermostat quite thoroughly, but then I'm going to go through here and clean absolutely everything out. I want this to be just perfect. Now, we'll deal with replacing this gasket right here in just a second, and the 2 O-rings are going to go on the top of your 2 round cooler pipes right here. These are the top of your oil cooler, the down underneath the car. Okay, so if you've got a mess, go ahead and clean it up like I do. I'm going to make sure it looks brand new, and then I'll show you about replacing the gasket and putting this back on. All right, y'all, that looks so much better. I've sacrificed about an entire roll of paper towels. But make sure to get, all the nooks and crannies, get underneath, and get underneath any of the pipes if it's leaked through. I want to make sure it's as clean as possible. Now, you can see the original gasket is still in. That is where it very likely will be. If you have the OEM thermostat, sometimes the gasket will come with it. If you have the Mosselman, it'll absolutely stay behind. You can just use a pick tool to just very gently pull this out. You don't want to score up any of the aluminum or anything, so make sure that you pull it out really, really gently. Once you get it out, you're probably going to want to clean up this area again. As you can tell, I got a little bit of oil off. Now, the two O-rings right here, in this case, I actually wondered where they went. Because you have two O-rings that sit up against these collars right here on your two feed pipes, on your feed and return pipe, right? Now, in my case, they'd actually stayed behind in the thermostat. So make sure to check the thermostat body, flip it over, look underneath, see if there's your O-rings trapped inside if you don't see them right here. Make sure you don't double up, don't miss them. If you had two O-rings, it might not seal properly and that could create a real issue, okay? So then you're just going to take the body gasket and just fit it right back into place. It'll go straight back in without any issues whatsoever. And then you can put your two O-rings on your pipes here, and then we'll look to fit the thermostat back on. All right, so let's go ahead and get all of our gaskets in place. So you've got the two rings here on the pipe. As you can tell, you can see them clearly now. And you've got the new one. Don't separate it. It's all in one piece. You've got these two separate sides, but it's joined through the middle. Don't pull it apart. And just slide it into place. Now, it should hold in place. There's little fingers around on the gasket. Make sure it's sealed down really nicely. It's sitting deeply back into the track, and it's not sitting strangely. Now, also, you can tell by looking at the new one, as you can see, it stands out really, really firmly, where in a couple of places on the old one, it was flattened. It's probably where it was leaking. Now, what I'm going to do when I put the thermostat back on, I put the thermostat body back into place, and I will loosely seat all three bolts. Now, you don't want to just crank on one, crank it down all the way, and then do all three. You want to make sure that you bring them all in together. So what I'll normally do is I'll seat the thermostat nicely, make sure it's in place, and I'll just finger tight all three bolts, and then I'll slowly tighten all three around. Now, if you check the video description, I'll have all the part numbers, all the tools you need, including the torque value for these bolts, okay? But snug them down all equally, almost like you're doing tires, right? Or putting your wheels on. Because what you don't want is you don't want your thermostat sitting kind of cockeyed or sitting at a strange angle, because it's gonna cause this to leak. Okay, so go ahead and slide that back into place. Once that's in and all the three of those bolts are in, you can fit this back. You can fit this back up into the thermostat body. As you can tell, I've got the collar kind of sitting down off the side here to make sure that it was nice and clean. And you can see that's where that long bolt attaches to that collar and pulls the entire assembly up into place. Okay, so go ahead and get this all put into place. Check the video description for the torque value for those three bolts, and you're almost done. All right, so as you can see, the thermostat housing is back on. I haven't connected anything else yet, but the thermostat housing is back on. If you haven't checked the video description, it's 16 Newton meters for those bolts. And I walked my way around just kind of snug and a little bit tighter and a little bit tighter, and made sure that once I was snugging them down to the proper torque value, that they went on evenly, okay? I think I just called these gaskets a second ago, but they're O-rings. You know what I mean. So make sure that your O-rings are in place. You can take this and now fit these back into the bottom of your thermostat, feed the big long bolt back in with that 5mm Allen and cinch it up tight. Okay, at that point, we're just back into reassembly. I'm gonna put that reverse Torx 8 back over here to get this pipe reconnected. I'm gonna set this back down, this little plastic pin back in here. I did this to get a little bit more room. Then I'm gonna put my intake back on and my cross brace back on, which again, if you have an N55, you just put your intake back on and connect everything. But I'll walk you through those steps, but we're pretty much done. All right, also one quick last button-up look here. It looks really, really good. I tell you, a clean engine makes me happy. Call me a simple guy. But all of this being clean again, and you don't see any visible oil, and it just makes my heart happy. Plus, I know I don't have a very slight leak now, which is a good thing. So everything's all buttoned up, clean up, go ahead and put your tools away. All right, guys, all done. Go ahead and clean up and put your tools away. And you can tell this is not a hard project. This is going to take you a little while and a few simple tools. This is something you can easily do to your S55 or N55 motor, save yourself all of that shop time and reinstall some relatively cheap gaskets and take care of any oil leaks or any problems that might crop up. This is definitely a maintenance thing that can come up, as this gasket definitely can fail over time. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please make sure to click like and subscribe. It makes a huge difference to my channel. Honestly, it really does. Plus, I have a ton of new content coming that I cannot wait to show you. It's going to be awesome. Thank you so much. I'll see you on my next video.